Ever clocked in for like a 40-hour work week? Or maybe browsed online deals for that, perfect car? You might be surprised to learn that these things, and so much more in our modern world, have roots in the early 20th century, thanks to a man named, you probably guessed it, Henry Ford.
It's true. What we take for granted today, affordable goods, the very structure of our work week, it all traces back to the innovations of Henry Ford.
So today, we're going deep on one of his most impactful creations, the moving assembly line. We're going to unpack how it worked, why it mattered, and the ripple effects it had on industry and on society.
It's a fascinating story.
It really is. And it all starts with Ford's vision, this almost audacious goal to make car ownership a reality for everyone, not just the wealthy.
Right. It wasn't enough for him to just build cars. He wanted to build them for the masses.
He famously declared, "When I'm through, about everybody will have one."
Yeah.
He was talking about, his dream of a motor car for the great multitude. But how do you go from that ambitious dream to actually putting affordable cars in every driveway?
Well, you had to revolutionize the way cars were made. That's where the assembly line comes in.
Okay, so paint a picture for us. What did those early factories look like?
So even before the moving assembly line, Ford was already laser-focused on efficiency. He was determined to find the fastest and cheapest way to produce the Model T.
So were they already high-tech with robots and conveyor belts?
Not quite. Imagine this. Workers would line up all the parts on the factory floor, place the car body on skids, and literally drag it along as they worked.
That sounds exhausting, and not exactly the picture of efficiency.
Exactly. It was slow, cumbersome, and Ford knew there had to be a better way. That's when he made a decision that would change everything. He broke down the Model T assembly into 84 specific tasks.
84. That sounds incredibly specific. What was the thinking behind that?
Ford, along with Frederick Taylor, who was a pioneer in scientific management, believed that by breaking down these complex jobs into smaller, repeatable tasks, they could dramatically increase efficiency.
Interesting. So each worker became a specialist in their assigned task, repeating the same process over and over.
Yes, exactly.
I can see how that would speed things up. But what about the workers? Going from building an entire car to tightening the same bolt all day, that must have been a huge adjustment for those workers.
It absolutely was. And it's a point we'll come back to because it gets right to the heart of the impact and the controversies around the assembly line.
Okay, so we've got Ford, obsessed with efficiency, breaking down car assembly into a carefully choreographed dance of 84 tasks. But I'm still curious about the moving part of the assembly line. Where did that inspiration come from?
That's where things get really interesting. We often think of innovation as this, spark of genius. But in reality, it's often about connecting seemingly totally disparate ideas.
Right.
And that's precisely what Ford did. He looked outside the automotive industry altogether,
Interesting.
drawing inspiration from some very unexpected sources.
Don't tell me he got inspired by watching bread dough rise.
Not quite, but you're on the right track. He was fascinated by continuous flow processes used in industries like flour mills, breweries, and even canneries. Think about it. Grain moving through a mill, bottles along a conveyor belt in a brewery. It's all about smooth, uninterrupted movement.
So he was basically taking cues from how food was processed and applying it to car manufacturing. That's wild.
And it wasn't just food production. The Chicago meatpacking industry, with its disassembly lines where carcasses were broken down step by step, also caught Ford's eye.
Okay, that image is a little jarring when we're talking about, building something. But I get the concept. Taking a complex process and breaking it down into a series of smaller, more manageable steps.
Precisely. Ford recognized the efficiency of these continuous flow processes and envisioned adapting that same principle to his assembly lines.
And that vision, this blend of breaking down tasks and keeping things moving, is what led to that pivotal moment, right? The birth of the moving assembly line.
Exactly. On December 1st, 1913, Ford installed his first moving chassis assembly line at his Highland Park plant. Forget ropes and skids. This was a system designed for continuous flow, with a chain system pulling the chassis along at a steady pace.
This is where the factory floor, as we know it, really starts to take shape. But tell me, how did the workers adapt to this new system? It must have been a huge change from the drag-it-yourself days.
It was a monumental shift, both in terms of how work was done and the impact it had on the workers themselves. And that's where we start to see some of the more complex and nuanced legacies of the assembly line emerge.
So we have these chassis gliding along on this chain system, but this is just the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Didn't Ford continue to refine and improve the assembly line?
Absolutely. In 1914, Ford introduced a mechanized belt that moved at a then-revolutionary 6 feet per minute.
6 feet per minute? That doesn't sound terribly fast.
It might not sound like much, but consider this. Before the moving assembly line, it took over 12 hours to build a single Model T. With this new system in place, that time plummeted to just 1 hour and 33 minutes.
That's incredible. So much faster. No wonder it revolutionized the industry.
Yeah.
But I imagine not everyone was thrilled with this new, super efficient system.
Yeah.
What about those workers we talked about, adjusting to a whole new way of working?
You're right, it was a double-edged sword. On one hand, the assembly line made cars more affordable, more accessible to the average person, but it also had a profound impact on the nature of work itself.
Right.
The repetitive tasks, though efficient, could be, well, mind-numbing. Workers went from experiencing the satisfaction of building an entire car to tightening the same bolt day in and day out.
Yeah, it sounds like it could wear a person down pretty quickly. Did Ford do anything to address those concerns?
He did. And this is where Ford's legacy gets even more interesting. He understood that this new system, while efficient, could also be incredibly demanding. To combat worker dissatisfaction and high turnover rates, he made a decision that would send shockwaves throughout the industrial world.
Okay, let's have it.
He introduced the $5 workday.
Okay, now we're talking. This was a huge deal, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, $5 a day back then.
Yeah.
Tell me more about this $5 workday and why it was so groundbreaking.
At that time, the average factory worker was earning something like between $2 and $3 per day. Ford's decision to more than double that wage was practically unheard of.
I can only imagine the reaction. It's like winning the lottery every payday.
But
But this wasn't just about generosity, was it? There was a strategic element to this decision as well, right?
absolutely. Ford was a shrewd businessman. He realized that happier, well-compensated workers were more likely to stay put, which reduced those costly turnover rates. And a stable workforce meant consistent productivity, a higher quality product.
So by investing in his workforce, he was ultimately investing in the success of his own company.
Precisely. And the results speak for themselves. After implementing the $5 workday, Ford's profits actually increased.
Wow.
This bold move demonstrated that paying workers a living wage wasn't just morally sound, it was good for business.
It's amazing to think that a decision driven by improving working conditions on the assembly line had these ripple effects, boosting both worker satisfaction and the company's bottom line.
And the ripple effects didn't stop there. The $5 workday became a model for fair wages and labor practices in other industries. It even influenced the eventual adoption of the 40-hour workweek and the idea of benefits packages.
It's remarkable how these seemingly isolated innovations, the moving assembly line, the $5 workday, were interconnected, each one influencing the other in this chain reaction of progress.
And that's really the heart of Ford's legacy, isn't it? This understanding that innovation isn't just about technology, it's about how technology and people interact. But this is just one part of the story. The impact of Ford's vision extended far beyond the factory floor, shaping society and consumerism in ways that we still feel today.
So we're talking about a seismic shift, not just in how things were made, but also in how people worked, how they were compensated, and even how they spent their money.
Exactly. This combination of mass production and higher wages, it wasn't just a business model. It became a philosophy, almost an ideology.
It did.
Yeah, we even have a name for it.
What is it?
Fordism.
Fordism. It sounds so official. So how did Fordism spread from this one car company to become this broader societal force?
Well, success breeds imitation. Other industries saw the incredible gains Ford was making, increased productivity, a more stable workforce, higher profits, and they started to adopt similar practices.
It's fascinating how these innovations born in the car factory spilled over into other areas of life.
Yeah.
We talked about the 40-hour workweek and benefits packages, but didn't you say something about Ford's influence on consumerism as well?
Absolutely. See, the efficiency of the assembly line didn't just benefit Ford.
Right.
By streamlining production, he was able to lower the cost of the Model T, making it affordable to a much wider range of people.
This goes back to his initial goal, right? To make a car for the masses.
Exactly, and he succeeded. By 1925, the price of a Model T had dropped to a mere $260. This unprecedented affordability led to a boom in car ownership, which had this cascade of effects on society.
I can only imagine. Suddenly, people aren't just confined to their towns and cities anymore. It opens up this whole new world of possibilities.
Precisely. And that's exactly what happened. The rise of the automobile led to the development of highways, suburbs as we know them, and a whole culture built around the freedom and mobility of car ownership.
Right.
Think about road trips, drive-in movies, the very notion of commuting. None of that would be possible without widespread car ownership, which Ford's innovations helped make a reality.
So to bring it back to our listener, what does all of this mean for them here in the 21st century? Most of us weren't even alive when the Model T was rolling off the assembly line. Why should this story matter to us today?
It's a great question. Take a look around. The world we live in, a world shaped by mass production, global trade, our very expectations of work-life balance, it's all connected to those early innovations of Henry Ford.
It really is.
We might take these things for granted, but they were revolutionary in their time, and they continue to shape the way we live today.
It's like you said earlier, these weren't just innovations in technology. They were innovations in how we think about work, society, and our relationship to the things we consume.
And that's a legacy worth reflecting on. It's a reminder that even the smallest innovations can have these massive ripple effects, shaping the world in ways we might not even imagine.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Henry Ford and his assembly line, is there one final thought, one question you want to leave our listener with?
How about this? Next time you're stuck in traffic or marveling at the price tag of the latest gadget, take a moment to think about Henry Ford and his assembly line. It might just change your perspective on the world around you.
It's a powerful reminder that history isn't just something we read about in textbooks. It's alive in the very fabric of our lives. Thanks for joining us on this fascinating journey back to the dawn of the assembly line. Until next time, keep those minds curious and those questions coming.